Welcome to the post-equinox integration. GevaAnn can't be with us, so hopefully I'll be posting her part separately later on. So we want to talk about what we are working with, having moved through that full moon gateway and the equinox portal. So energetically, let's speak of the elements. The elements that have been really important have been earth and water. And what you get when you combine earth and water is clay. Everything is mutable, everything is malleable, everything has an opportunity to change form. And all the way through the lunar phase leading up to the equinox, what we were working with was the expansion of expansion itself. So the collective human consciousness was moving through an evolutionary shift, which was changing, making changes in our collective human blueprints when we were receiving divine activations in our DNA, in the encodements of consciousness that affect how much of our human consciousness can experience itself multidimensionally. How much and in what ways can our human experience expand to include that experience of our divine multidimensionality, and where the expansion was happening, what dimension of consciousness and what dimension of the self that the expansion and these activations were happening was the dimension of ourselves, which is matter, which is made things. So there is this combination of being like clay, ready to take new forms, in the realm of matter and made things, because that is also a realm of consciousness. Everything is a realm of consciousness, and every realm of consciousness has a corresponding energy realm, energetic realm within the self. There's an expansion happening within that energetic dimension within the self. And we're ready to change, to be sculpted into new forms that reflect, that are vastly expanded from, where we might have begun from at the beginning of this lunar phase, the one leading up to the equinox. So that new moon would have been the beginning of that lunar phase leading up to the equinox. So we're ready to change shape to allow our consciousness to expand and to resonate with more of the wholeness we are, to reflect that awareness of our interconnectivity, that we are interconnected beings within ourselves, with each other, with all of life, and with all that is. We're allowing the dimension of our consciousness, and so the dimension of our reality is going to get reflected back to us, that is things, made things, to transform, to not only expand and support us in our expansion, so we are being supported in our expansion, but to transform beyond recognition. This means that it's possible at times like this for our physical universe to transform beyond recognition, but there is a positive alignment that we were encouraged and supported, divinely supported. There was divine intervention supporting us collectively to give more energy to, more weight to, transformations in our physical environment that reflect the wholeness we are, the divinity we are, the interconnectivity awareness that is that sort of main signal of ascension consciousness, and that expanding, constantly shifting and morphing and muting consciousness awareness. Now we're speaking about the collective consciousness here, the shifts happening in collective consciousness. And although this is very informational, just let the words come and be with what they activate for you personally, because each of us have a very unique experience of how this is going to play out and how this has been playing out in our worlds. So on the other side of the equinox, what we're really integrating is the expansion has happened. There has been an expansion in a dimension of our energy fields that corresponds to us being supported to change shape, to change the shape and some shapes in our physical universe. Now, what shapes change? That's unique to us. How that change plays out, that's unique to every individual. the general theme, if there is a general theme, is very much an expansion in being supported in our doingness, our activity energy, where that activity energy is aligned with our essence, the truth of who we are, where spirit is dancing with soul, where what we do is aligned with our beingness, a doingness and beingness coming together. So what that can mean is there's support right now for a massive expansion in doing from truth. So aligning our doingness activities with the truth of our essence. So that can mean anything, but the main characteristic of that, or one of the tools we need, if we like, qualities that help us, is surrender. Letting go of knowing what that's going to look like, because the element that's going to come and help us soon is fire. After mud and water making clay that's ready to change shape, what comes along is fire to bake that clay and really galvanize that form. But because the energies that have been leading up to this are expansion, we've been lifted collectively and expanded. This is what's being supported beyond what we were able to see before. So it's necessary to, I would say, allow a little free fall surrender. Allow ourselves to surrender to us being expanded way beyond the limits of what we think is possible, of what we could imagine, a not knowingness of how is my physical universe going to change shape, but trusting in our surrender that we're not surrendering to the worst of that possibility, we're surrendering to the very best of that potential. So we've made a choice as to align with our highest potential and the wholeness we are, and we're surrendering to the possibility that the expansion is taking place in our capacity to do in alignment with the truth of who we are. So those are the kind of core themes at work that I've been really aware of, but this is combined with an activational element. All the way through the last lunar phase, and very powerfully so at the equinox, there was an activation happening. Now, this is where I think I'm going to call on some support from the guys to try and explain this, because it's like the elemental dimensions of the self, supporting us to physically experience more of the oneness and wholeness we are at the highest potentiality for divinity, to physically experience more of the highest potential for wholeness that we are, not only in our actions, but in our interactions with the physical universe, this is supporting expansion to take place in the shapes, to reform our reality and in the physical universe. Now this, as I say, this is a general, and specifically and uniquely to us, this will mean so many different things. I just keep getting this reference. It's like earlier on in the lunar phase, there was the opening of an energetic dimension. There was an opening of a dimension within the energy fields. And this is what laid the foundations for us for the expansion that we've just been moving through collectively. And this is where I'm just going to summarize and say where we can experience oneness as a vibration in how we're relating to made things in our physical universe. So there are things in your life where you just think, oh, this is so annoying, and it's always going to be annoying, and this always happens like this, and this thing that I have to deal with is really, it hurts me, or it constricts me, or it gets in the way, or it doesn't support me, or we can have feelings like that about all sorts of things. made things that other human beings have made. And it's not that the things are wrong, it's our relationship to things. That doesn't mean that human beings are always making things in perfect alignment with divinity, because we're not. And this is one of the main features of the activation, is that, and the collective shift at the moment, is that we're on a trajectory where the collective of human consciousness is going to be supported more and more and more to align how we're making and what we're making from the Earth Gaia resources, with the principles for connected awareness that we are embodying and integrating as a collective consciousness. So the more aware we become of our interconnectivity, the more we're supported to make choices that align, that change the way we're creating with the Earth's resources. So that's a kind of a given. But we don't have to wait for human beings and humanity to be perfectly aligned in their creating before we are energetically able to resonate within our physical universe in wholeness. To shift how it's not about the thing that we're interacting with, it's not about the creations that are in our world, it's about how are we relating to them, how are we allowing them to affect us, what are the beliefs we have around that, and what are the how are we vibrationally interacting with the things in our universe. Now we're shifting our vibrational state, that's shifting how we're interacting vibrationally within our physical universe. What's the shift is an expansion of a capacity to vibrate with the innate integral harmony that exists within all things. So this involves you understanding that everything is consciousness, everything has a vibration, but also within every vibration is a template, a divine template. It's that potential for wholeness and harmony that exists within all things. And although we can argue about the nature of a thing in and of itself and say whether it's good or bad, and do we judge it, and what value do we place upon it, when it's within our personal experience, it's an energetic activity within our energy field. So whatever it is in and of itself, and whatever we think it is in and of itself, when we're experiencing it, whether we're perceiving it, experiencing it, interacting with it, whatever it is, it could be anything. It could be anything that is made by human beings. When we're interacting with it, it becomes an energetic activity in our field. And we have sovereignty in how that behaves towards us, how we experience it, what we perceive, what is the energetic communication and exchange happening between us and this thing. So I mean, that's a whole other topic to open up, and quite a fun one for me as well, but let's leave that there and focus more on what I wanted to say. Was that the DNA that was activating in our fields over the equinox was a DNA encodements that spoke, that were last active in the time of our First Nations elders, that are the encodements that remind us that even physical made things, that things made by Gaia, that things made by humans are consciousness, and that everything is a vibration, and that we can breathe harmoniously with everything in our fields. Now, the interconnectivity awareness that was so commonly associated with and recognized with the guardianship of our First Nation elders is alive within our DNA and being activated now. When we, as a race, last had these encodements, particular encodements active within our DNA, there was a bit of a difference to where we are now. See, we were on a path collectively of moving away from source, and here we are on a homecoming trajectory of moving towards source, which is also to say moving towards connectivity awareness, remembering wholeness, remembering that we're part of the more, we are one with all that is. When those encodements were last active, humanity was moving away from that awareness, and there was, although the activations are happening now, the configurations in our DNA are not the same. Where they were over the full moon and equinox, and in between now and the new moon, there's this reconfiguration happening. So there's a divine remembering of that earth vibration, the Gaia fields remembering of oneness. But there's a reconfiguration happening because we're facing our homecoming. We haven't got the grief and the pain and the frustration of moving into disconnectivity. We've got, and what's being supported by this activation, and in fact I keep getting what the First Nation elders guides who are very present at this time are supporting, is the joy rather than the grief of moving into disconnectivity. And we're not so much healing that and working with that. The emphasis is on the joy of moving into reconnectivity, of changing the trajectory of how humans create within the earth. Now, changing the energetics is like there's changing things on the causal plane. It takes a long time before these changes are then seen and visible and manifest into the world. So, as I've said, before, if you're looking with your eyes and mind out into the visible landscape of what you can see and calling that reality, then you get a pretty poor reading. That can be a very hopeless reading. It could be a reading which says, well, humanity is still making a mess, things are a disaster, this is all really terrible. But that's because it takes a long time for the changes in consciousness to become really clearly, unavoidably visible in the manifested physical plane. What is opening is a shift in consciousness that's internal. When we make a shift in the consciousness that is internal, it will feed out. It will affect what we're manifesting, how we're manifesting. It will become physical change. But that's a process and there is time. So to recognize and register that a shift has happened, we need to stop looking outwards for a moment to interrupt that way of making our assessments of how we're doing collectively and turn those eyes inwards and take our readings from facing inwards. And when we do that, we take our readings from facing inwards, we get a very different reading indeed. And we can see the success, the achievements, the incredible shifts that are happening in the causal plane of consciousness, which is going to cause change to come about, cause new things to come about. And like I say, make it less and less possible for us to collectively to sustain ways of creating that aren't based in an awareness of interconnectivity, that don't come from wholeness. So what I wanted, moving from that, what I wanted for GevaAnn, which I think she will speak with when we get her contribution, what she'll be speaking on is the shift happening now is a shift of Gaia's consciousness. Gaia is ascending, the consciousness of the planet is shifting. And as she ascends, she's kind of stretching and moving and breathing. She is reforming. So the surface of the planet, the planetary behavior, how Gaia is expressing herself, her made things. Now Gaia's made things of plants, trees, volcanoes, rocks, air, sky, all of it, everything that we consider the natural world, I would say, are what Gaia makes. And there's reforming happening within her now. And I mean, it would be more logical really to speak of her ascension first, because we are within her ascension. The ascension of human consciousness is the ascension within Gaia. So some of the climate change and some of the shifts that are happening now are part of Gaia's, the shifts that are happening within the planet that are part of an ascension of Gaia expanding and shifting and growing and changing and reforming and reshaping herself. So a lot of the shifts have a positive premise. However, there are negative experiences for humanity that really support humanity being moved in the way that keeps us up to date, keeps us in sync with her ascension. So keeps our ascension in sync within her ascension, because some of the core realizations we need to have is that, well, we can't sustain creating in a way that's not coming from interconnected awareness, not understanding that we need to understand we have an impact on the planet, but that we don't control the planet, that we impact her, but we don't we are not the most powerful thing on the planet. The planet is the most powerful thing on the planet. The planet can heal herself. She could have healed herself of us if we were that much of a nuisance. She's not. She's including us in her ascension process. She's holding us, but we are not being as protected and sheltered from the consequences of our own actions. And this is very much like any child growing up within the care of a mother. Is there comes a point when, for a long time as a child, you're sheltered from the consequences of your actions because you're simply not old enough and mature enough to take that responsibility, to have that awareness. But there comes a point when you are, and you are maturing. And part of humanity's maturation is that we're able to take a little more responsibility. We're able to have a little more awareness. The shifts in consciousness, the collective evolution is supporting us to be more aware. Oh, we are within a biological organism. We are bioorganisms within a bioorganism. We're connected, we breathe together, we're affected by, and we affect. And what we do has an impact. And actually, the planet can heal herself, but actually, it's what we do impacts us. It impacts us, it impacts the surface and the terrain, it impacts the ecology, it impacts the animals, and that all comes back and impacts us. So we're having a kind of awakening. Some of the climate change is causing us suffering so that we're pushed, I mean lovingly, but pushed to reevaluate right in the details, right at the ground level, not just the big picture stuff, but the very details of the choices we make when everything we do humanly, we do with Gaia's resources. There's nothing we do that isn't with where we're not using resources that come from another planet, come from somewhere external. We're always forming. We're always taking this clay and we're forming things from the mother body, bringing things into form. And we're simply being invited to take the next step of conscious awareness in how we do that. Coming from a place of connectivity, that's being activated in our DNA. And what we individually do to work with that is as varied as it's as different as there are as many different versions of that as there are human beings on the planet. There is not an onus for each of 7 odd billion Earths to suddenly become all conscious in the same way and become enlightened in the same way and ascend in the same way, or even at all. Each of us are part of a huge living, breathing body, like cells in a body. And how these changes and shifts play out for us, well, that's beautiful and exciting and unique. And there's something for all of us in that. So thank you for being with that. A very high speed update this time, not slow and meditative, I'm afraid. That's part of what's changing for me at the moment. I'm not saying that all my updates are now going to be intense, informational energy updates, but I'm being with the shifts and changes that are happening for me. And there seems to be one just right now. I've gone from being very slow and deep to suddenly being very supercharged. So that's just now. So this is how it is. And this is what comes in this moment. Thanks for being with it. It's been really lovely just to share and take a few moments to dock in. It's funny, I will just end with this because it has been high paced, very informational and kind of highly charged sort of energy update this time. But what keeps coming to me is what supports us anchoring in the expansion on the other side of the equinox is stopping in between activities and taking that breath. It's always important, but it's very important now. To take a breath between one thing before another thing starts, because in a breath, the whole universe can change. In a breath, we're aligned with the breath of creation itself. It can be. In a breath, we can let go of everything and allow everything to be reborn. It can be a moment outside space and time. And in times of acceleration or expansion, it can also be a place where we find again our center, that moment of calm, that stillness, where we let go of what was a moment ago. We're not yet in what's about to be in the next moment. We just have this spaciousness in the now, moment. So as we come out of this, I'm going to take this moment for us to, just a few moments to be with this now. You're invited to close the outward facing eyes, make the intention and let go, to turn those eyes inwards, dropping into the heart and center, opening to notice the physical sensations in the center of the chest, just that there are some. And allow the breath to come exactly as it comes in this moment. One in breath, one out breath. And that's enough. Thank you. And whatever comes for you, the peace, if the peace is what comes, inviting whatever comes in that breath, that moment, to expand out into your physical universe, not needing to know what quality we connect with, but inviting that quality that comes from source, comes from love. To expand out into our physical environment, just as the breath, as though the breath was breathing it in to our physical universe. Know that what's not for us is being breathed out. We're breathing in what's for us. And our physical universe, and we can take a moment to be a center and cell. Our whole physical universe is breathing in and breathing out. And when we invite ourselves to open to the possibility that what we're breathing into our physical universe and what we're breathing out comes from love, supporting us to align for wholeness, to experience more of wholeness, more physically. Now we interact and move through the world. And just for a moment, we can bring it to resting in the seat and center of the heart. Let awareness roll on out into the physical universe in all directions. I mean, you can start with being aware as you close your eyes that you have furniture in the room or what's around you right now, inside or outside. And then imagine that your awareness just keeps on rolling on out in all directions. And somewhere there's a you that's reading everything that's in your physical universe, but it doesn't have to be in the head. So letting ourselves be in the seat and center, while awareness rolls on out into the vastness of our physical universe, recognizing that our experience of that is ours alone. It's a dimension in our energy field. How we relate to our physical universe belongs only to us. It's no one else's experience in here now. We are the sovereign commanders, choice makers, and script writers for how we are going to experience the physical universe and ourselves in it, how we're going to interact with it. Rather than thinking that or constructing that, we can just make the intention right now. I rest in the wholeness that is here. I resonate vibrationally with the vibrational wholeness that is present here in these physical dimensions of my existence, my experience. I empower this as the more real in my experience. I let go of what connected me to the old ways of interacting within my physical universe. I allow change, reformation, and expansion here now. Okay, loves. Thank you. So a little activational exercise to play with that. So if you want to join in that deep, slow, beautiful inner journey space that we touch on sometimes, do message me, infinityresonance@gmail.com. Send me a message. Because every full and new moon, we join in a journey for an hour and dive into a deep alignment with our the divine blueprints, our divine DNA, golden templates in our human blueprint. But really, it's a journey in centering, aligning, and allowing the gifts that are there in the moment. And of course, I'm here for one-to-one work, which is a combination of channeled energy work and self-awareness guidance to help you align with your divine human blueprint. All right, guys. Thank you so much for being there. It was beautiful to connect. I'm going to go look after my cat now. He's got a girlfriend. Very exciting. So, and she's actually just come upstairs and knocked on the door. So I'm going to go and let her in. All right. Bye for now.